Greg, a lot of people take over, a lot of coaches take over programs, and they don't really have a lot of interest in talking about what came before them or the tradition. But you took over the program in 2007, and you really embraced the legacy of Coach Nevers, who was one of the founders of this program. Talk about your relationship with Coach Nevers over the last 10 years or so of his life.
It started out, my relationship with Tom, I didn't even really know who he was, and it sort of happened initially by accident. He had come up to summer camp to pick up his grandson and just began talking to me one day, and I had no idea who I was speaking to. And after saying what a terrible person Tom Nevers was and telling me what a horrible place Eastern was and how the soccer program was a disaster and how could they ever let Tom Nevers coach, on his way out the door with his grandson, he reached out and he said, "Can you do me a favor?" And I still had no idea it was him. And he looked at me and he said, "Can you tell Bill Holowati that Tommy Nevers said hello?" And the shock on my face, I thought I was talking to some crazy person, and then it turned out it was Tom, and then later to find out that that's sort of how he was, joking around with people and busting people's chops and giving them a hard time as much as he possibly could. And that's sort of how our relationship, quote unquote, started, with him doing exactly that to me having no idea who he was, and then saying to myself, "Wow, you're Tom Nevers?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm Tommy Nevers. Make sure you tell Coach Holowati that I said hello." So from that point on, although it was somewhat of an accident that we finally met, I encouraged him to start coming back to games because, to the best of my knowledge, he hadn't been attending games, and that's sort of where it started, whether it was his daughter bringing him or sometimes Doc Yo would pick him up and take him. He started coming out to more and more matches. So it was nice that he could have that and be a part of what he had started, so many years before I was even born.
Talk about, Greg, you guys have done so many things in his name and to honor and respect his legacy. Talk about some of the things that you've done to involve him.
I think in addition, we always try to invite him to our end of the year banquet and include him in as many team things as possible, because again, if it wasn't for him and his legacy, none of us would really be where we are today. So in addition to coming to the matches and so forth, and just trying to include him in things, once he did pass on, we started the scholarship in his name and the golf tournament in his name, which has just taken off and been great, really, and been a huge event for not only for our program, but also for Tom's family. And since the time of his passing, I've gotten to know his son and his daughter pretty well, his sister, his brother-in-law, nephews, cousins, and I think we're up to about 25 members of the Nevers family that attend the golf tournament every year, and it's like a little mini reunion for them, which is really nice to see.
Could you ever think back and think about what it must have been like when he started the program in the 60s and 70s in terms of lack of facilities and everything else that goes along with it?
Yeah, he must have been doing something right, because he was getting some really talented players from this area, from E.O. Smith High School and from the Coventry area. And, some of the players that he got to come play at Eastern is pretty amazing, I think. I'm sure he must have been a part-time coach back in the day, and the facility, I'm sure, was okay, comparatively speaking, but they played everyone. They played Division I teams. They played Division II teams. I know they played UConn every year in the indoor tournaments, and the guys that played here must have had one heck of an experience because of the level that they played at, because there wasn't any, hey, you're just a Division III team, so you only play Division III schools. It seems like Eastern was willing and did play anybody. So I'm sure that wasn't easy to compete against those teams, but it seems like they did a very good job of it.
What do you think are some of the challenges for you as a head coach now, or in this era in the 2000s, some things that maybe Coach Nevers didn't have to deal with as a coach?
I think as a coach, you just have to adapt to how people are, and that's one of the things I hope that I'm getting better at, is just adapting and changing with the time. So I'm sure the problems that Coach Nevers had, the problems that I had are pretty similar, and they were just adapting to things changing over time. And obviously technology is a big part of our life today that we didn't have a long time ago. So dealing with, how people communicate and so forth today versus how they communicated then was probably very different, but I'm sure it's not unlike certain challenges that he had dealing with the changing times with people and being able to, communicate with people that were a lot younger than we are as with that coach and player relationship. So I'm sure the challenges are probably very similar.
Greg, when you took over in 2005 as an assistant coach, did you ever think in your wildest dreams that you would be here and end up being the winningest coach in program history? Is that something a coach thinks about when they first start a job?
I certainly didn't. And for all I knew when I took over, Franz was going to coach Franz, he's still coaching today. So, he was still very young, and he's still, he's been involved in the high school game now for several years since he left here. He hasn't stopped coaching. So you never know what's going to happen. Just worked out that way that he decided to leave college coaching, and now he's still impacting the game at the club level, still impacting the game at the high school level. So I never thought that I'd be a head coach here, at least for a long time. I figured Franzi would be here for quite some time, and I was actually really surprised when he told me after a couple of years that he was considering retiring. So I don't think those thoughts really ever enter your mind, and it's a great opportunity that that I had given to me to be here. So I think I'm trying to make the most of it every day. But I don't think those thoughts really go into your mind when you start coaching. I'm going to try to break Coach Nevers' record of hundreds of games that he won and all the things that he accomplished while he was here.
Was there a point in the last couple of years where you might have looked at the record book and just said, "Wow, I'm sort of getting closer"?
I think a few years back, someone told me that I had passed Franzi's win total, and so that's when I even realized, what Coach Nevers had done in the time that he was here and how many wins he had, and the years go by fast, so you don't really think about it, but the wins, luckily the wins keep building up, and you recruit some good kids that win soccer games, and those things they tend to sneak up on you, I think.
As we talked about, Coach Nevers built an unbelievable tradition of success here. But when you took over, the program had gone through about 15, 18 years of sort of mediocrity, if you want to put it that way. What made you think that you could get it back to where it was?
I remember a friend of mine who coaches at Central now, Dave Kelly, said to me, he goes, everything's kind of in place at Eastern, and you just have to look at the small details. If you can get the guys to show up on time, and you can get them just to all do some of the little things better than what's going on there, because I kind of described to him how things were. He assured me that success could be had at Eastern by just concentrating on all the little parts of the game rather than trying to overhaul and completely do things differently. People being on time, people maybe putting in a couple extra minutes after practice, working on technique, just little things that maybe had been lost over the years. And he was right. It really, and you bring in some people that really want to get after the little details and work hard, and you can change things around pretty quickly.
Can you look back at when you first started, things that you do now? Can you look back at when you started 13 years ago and say, if I had to do it again, I probably wouldn't have done it that way? That's things that you learned over the years?
I can't think of anything specific, but I know that there's several things that, as time goes on, you live and learn and you adapt, and you always try to look at what you're doing and how you can do it better. And I know one of those moments for me was a couple of years back when we had our first losing season and didn't even make the postseason for the first time since I've been here. I think the losing really makes you look at things and what you could be doing differently and what you could be doing better, and that you can't get too comfortable. But I think there's certainly things that I do completely different, and it's interesting when you get together with some of the guys you've coached over the years, and they'll be like, "You're doing that now?" And they have these surprised looks on their face, like, "Wait a minute, that's what you're doing now?" I'm like, "Yeah, what are you talking about? You would have never done that, when we were playing." And so you think about those things, and kind of makes you feel good because you're adapting and you're changing with the times, and I think that's part of the longevity of the occupation. You have to.
Your program, a lot of people can't make it in your program. It's very, very demanding. But you've had so many success stories. People that maybe came in as freshmen, struggled to meet your demands, but came through it and are now very productive people in their career and personal lives. Can you recall a few of those people that you're most proud of?
There's so many success stories. Aaron Smiles comes to mind. You know, a guy that had so much talent and really put the talent to use while he was here, and probably was even better than he even realized, even in his 4 years here. And just a super kid. And, you know, college classes, I know wasn't particularly his favorite thing in the world, but, you know, together with the help of the department and Janice Patry and, you know, people that were really in his corner, I know he stands out as someone that I'm just really proud of. Getting through, you know, and getting a degree, and now he's doing great, you know. And for some kids, that's a big thing, like just getting the degree. It's not about are you a straight A student and things. And we have other kids that have come through where, you know, just getting a college degree is a big thing for them. It's not about the numbers, and you know, people make a big deal about the GPAs and things like that. But these are people that are super, super successful in life. And a lot of our alumni I look at today, and they're doing so well, you know, financially, and they're happy with where they're at in life. And I think those are the things that, you know, that really, the wins are great and the championships are all great. But, you know, having lunch with Max Fantel today was great, and seeing Jimmy McConville today was unbelievable. And you see these guys that you coached, you know, 10 years ago, and they have kids now, and they're married, and, you know, they're inviting you to their weddings. I think those are the things that are, you know, probably even more rewarding than the wins themselves.
Do you have any of those alumni come back and say to you, you know, Coach, I didn't really understand what you're doing at the time, or we thought it was a little bit over the top, but now we understand what you're talking about?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And there's probably still some that are trying to figure it out, but that's okay, you know. And the conversations that we have now as teachers and educators and coaches, sometimes they don't click for 10 years. And so I guess that's part of the challenge, is realizing and being patient with that, you know, the lessons you're trying to teach today, maybe people don't receive them immediately, but over time, they look back at the experience that they had, and all you can hope is that it was a positive experience.
Greg, congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.